and I'm always delighted to talk to one of the greatest orators, I believe, former government special advisor James Price. A very good afternoon. How are you, sir?
I don't know if I count as a binfluencer, but I've certainly talked a lot of rubbish in my time.
Hey, get it in there, son. Are we very good? How's the cat?
Puppy. If he's
puppy.
meant to be a cat, he's not very well, but he's fast asleep down there and he's doing well.
Ryan comes into the office every day. How are you, Ryan? My cat's been misbehaving. Why is that, Ryan? All it wants to do is jump on top of the Christmas tree. He said it's like having a child, but cheaper. The puppy's the same. It's not a substitute. Babies soon, JP. Babies soon, eh? You've been engaged for a couple of months. What's happening?
I know. We're getting there. Don't worry. The dog is just good training. I think, if anything, actually, he's probably going to be more of a handful than children. Because the thing with kids, right, you can teach them to hate the same things that you hate, whereas this dog seems to just love everybody equally.
Lovely, I love it. Fantastic. I don't want to be negative about Syria. You can spend all day talking about it. Were you shocked at how quickly Assad fell? I mean, I think it's great, but we have to remember that the different factions inside, the different religious factions, are going to probably tear lumps out of each other. And Donald Trump says it's not our problem. The one good thing about it is it sends a very strong message to the Ayatollahs in Iran, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole thing has been a basket case for a very long time. Anybody who tells you really that they're an expert on this and all the various different groups all pointing guns at each other from different parts of the desert is lying to you. This has been so complicated, and allegiances have been constantly shifting around, just as those sands are. And it's a little bit like, I think, the Iran-Iraq war of the 1980s, where Henry Kissinger lamented it's a pity they can't both lose. Because whilst you had Angela Rayner, the deputy prime minister, saying yesterday morning, oh, we welcome the fall of Assad, as if this is a really good thing. I mean, it's good in the sense that he's a terrible, terrible man responsible for the murder and gassing of, 600,000 of his own people and countless horrors like that. But as I've learned in recent years, things can always get worse. And it's not like it's the nice, cuddly, liberal, democratic type forces that we were trying to quite meekly back at various points in this conflict who've taken over. This is a combination of al-Qaeda affiliate groups, of ISIS, of some of the most awful, terrifying people on earth. And that the idea that they could be taking over the infrastructure of a state is not necessarily something that we should be pleased about. It's definitely good, as you say, that the mad mullahs and the ayatollahs in Iran have lost yet another proxy. All this is a direct result of the incredible work, frankly, that Israel has been doing since it was attacked so brutally last year. And we can talk about all the different kind of groupings going on there. But let's also remember that it was Joe Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, who said in late September last year that the Middle East is the most peaceful it's been for decades and decades. How bad a prognostication was that? I wouldn't be taking any tips from him.
Was he as old and confused as Biden? I will say to you and everybody else, we will talk in more detail about Syria, and we have this extraordinary story. Mo Saflo, a friend of Ryan's, who came over to this country 13 years ago as a Syrian refugee, has done everything, I think, JP, for me, that I think is right and proper, and why we can have people to this country, because this man couldn't have gone back to his country of birth for fear of being murdered, has missed so much, but put his head down, got qualifications, worked, got citizenship, pays tax, has done 3 jobs, and he is yearning to go home to his country of birth. But he comes to our country, gives something back, adopts the culture, doesn't spend his entire time slagging us off and taking advantage. Isn't that a positive example of migration? And I mean, I'm not saying there are more, but it's good to put that one out there when all we ever do is hear bad ones.
Yeah, absolutely. He sounds like a top man. It's exactly the sort of thing that we should be doing in these kind of war-torn areas. You take especially young people, and you take women and children in particular as well, who are likely to be victims if they're left in these sort of horrible displaced people camps and things like that, and you give them the kind of safety that they need. But of course, for every person that you take in, you can't take somebody else. There's a finite amount of space. We've talked about this when it comes to housing or other issues. I would much rather we take young people like that who've got something to learn, to contribute, and then want to go back when the time is right, or just vulnerable women and children in general, than the huge numbers of people that we have been taking in quite a gullible way, who've been saying that maybe they're Syrian, who've been saying they're Eritrean, and saying that they're children, by the way, when they're obviously anything but. And we've been taking in huge numbers of fighting age men from all over the world who are essentially just economic migrants. They're people who, fair enough, they want to come here to claim benefits, and then maybe some of them want to come and work as well, because we're seen, I think, rightly as a soft touch. Let's remember, they're setting off those small boats in
soft,
France.
man. Soft, just ridiculously soft, this country.
Yeah, softer than the brie that they're fleeing from in France.
Yeah,
but the sad fact is that we've let in lots and lots of people, and lots of people, again, as you've said, rather than saying, "Gosh, how wonderful Britain is, we're so grateful. I'm either going to learn the language, I'm going to integrate.
That's what
Maybe I'm
happens
going to
now.
dabble in this thing called Christianity. Isn't that wonderful as well? Certainly, liberal democracy, the rule of law, voting, all these so many things. Learn how to make a cup of tea if we want to be twee about it. People like my old boss Nadim Zahawi, who fled Saddam Hussein when he was 9 years old, and is integrated about as well as anybody ever could, rising to be chancellor and the vaccine hero and all those things. But instead, we seem to have let in so many people, as October the 7th, this horrible attack on Israel showed last year, of these students and others who poured out onto the streets of our major cities, screaming how great it is that Jews were killed, and then complained when and Robert Jenrick, actually, of all people, well done him, took some of their visas away. Oh, it's so terrible, you're kicking me out of this country. Well, you just said it was great that Jews were murdered and raped and just killed in cold blood. Yeah, I don't want you in this country anymore. And it seems that we've completely lost our minds about who can and can't have a right to be here.
Couldn't agree more. We'll do all of that. And don't forget, Mo Safler will be here in about 20 minutes. A Syrian refugee, now a British citizen. A really inspirational story. 13 minutes past 4. As JP and I speak, your thoughts 0344 499 1000. Your text to 87222. Start your message with the word talk. JP, I'm going to try not to rant. Heart attack and stroke patients in the West Midlands have been told to get yourself to A&E after calling 999 because of appalling hour-long waits, sometimes day-long waits for ambulances. Now, I'm not actually going to slag the ambulance drivers, and men and women. I mean, this is... people get really angry with me. They say, well, you need to put more money into the National Health Service. This is absolutely and utterly... I just think it's unforgivable, and it's not bloody acceptable. Why is it so bad? I've seen those programmes. I spent in the past 2 whole weeks working with ambulance crews. There's 4 ambulances for like a 100-mile radius, and you have those poor people in those control rooms who have to decide between a poor old woman of 80 who's fallen down the stairs and broken a leg, between some young guy who's been mashed up by a car. What are they supposed to do? It's unacceptable, man, isn't it?
Yeah, as it's doing to you and to me and probably to viewers and listeners right now, it's enough to make your blood boil.
Yeah.
And it is hard to know because the NHS is such an enormous organisation, right? It's one of the biggest employers in the world, I think, alongside the kind of Chinese military and the North Korean military and things like that, just in terms of sheer manpower. Although I'm sure you probably actually shouldn't say manpower anymore now. I've said it naughty.
Power, what's your pronouns,
Send me
Price?
off to a re-education
What's your
camp.
pronouns, Price, or you'll be off on one of those courses?
But the sacred cow of the NHS has, if not been slaughtered, is almost ready for the chop, because I think now so many people have realised that it isn't the envy of the world. The politicians of all parties have had to feel that they've had to say that it is. You remember one of Margaret Thatcher's chancellors, Nigel Lawson, said the NHS was the closest thing we had in this country to a national religion. And I think that's not the case anymore. No. It's not to knock the doctors, it's not to knock the nurses, it's not to knock the ambulance drivers.
It's not the institution that isn't fit for bleeding purpose, and we need to revamp it and not be worried about offending people. You're so right what you say there. If you dare to criticise the NHS for you can't get an appointment, you can't get an ambulance, you can't get this, they'll all say to you, it's the greatest. Yes, it is. One of the greatest inventions in the modern world. Very, very happy to pay. I've got a theory about this which goes down like a lead balloon, but I can always share it with you. I think the NHS, tied in a little bit to migration, is giving too much help to people who have never bloody well paid into it in the first place. And I genuinely mean that. I think that's appalling as well. But they have to spend their money better. I was just telling the guys a story off air. When Oliver was much younger, I think actually, to be fair, I think it was Henry. It might have been whatever. One of my sons was ill, and we had to phone an ambulance. And to be fair, because it was a child, they were there within about 20 minutes. And I'm in they let me come in the truck with the 2 ladies who were driving, and they were lovely. One was driving, one was in the back, and they explained to me that so difficult has it become in the ambulance service that I mean, this in itself will make you fall off your chair. If they arrive on time and the person dies, that's a tick with their bosses. If they arrive late and save person's life, they're censured. And that's a fact. That was told to me by NHS. If we arrive on time and the person dies, well done. If we arrive late and save their life, what was wrong with that? Well, the traffic, or I wasn't told. True.
So this I think is what happens quite a lot, where there are people who realise that state provided services, where the profit motive, a dirty word to some people, but it is what improves efficiency and gets better outcomes. If you can have some money in your pocket at the end of the day, that tends to help. People that realise that in the absence of that, you should nevertheless try to recreate some of the kind of private sector business practices that are very common. Anybody who's working right now and listening to this will know these sorts of things. But if they're not properly linked to actual outcomes, they're just sort of plucked out of the air, like this one sounds to be, you're going to get perverse incentives and things are going to go wrong. But pull the camera out slightly here, right? Every time now, for the rest of this week, anybody watching, listen to this, here's a story about something the government is doing, right? That is a lot of money, of resources, of attention span of ministers and other senior civil servants who are spending their time on that thing rather than on getting ambulances working better, rather than on making schools better, rather than on fixing the potholes or some of the stories we're going to talk about, the kind of bread and butter services that people want. And government is trying to do far, far, far too many things. It's grown enormously. And if you're somebody like me who has a kind of ideological, I'm happy to say it, idea that the state should be smaller, the reason I think that is not because necessarily I'm some headbanger. It's because I want the fewer things the state does to do them better, and that you can focus your resources on it. And obviously, healthcare is going to be part of that.
Let's go to the phone lines if you're okay to hold. Don't go anywhere. I want you in on this, JP. Steve's in the Midlands. Steve, you're on Talk Drive. What you got, pal?
Hello, Jeremy. Interesting to listen to you and James. Yeah, ambulances outside, it is a bad thing. We see it all the time. But the thing is, we can't get the people out. So it's not just this government. I mean, they're doing a really bad job. But even the one before, they didn't invest in the future. Healthcare is the key issue here. You get people, think of it as a garage. You car something wrong with your car, get it in the garage, get it fixed, you take it out. This is where it's stuck now, because we can't get them out. Because all those places that we used to have in the community before, where we could step them down to, where they were medically fit now, nearly ready to go home, but not quite, needed a bit more to work, they've all gone. Look at how many nursing homes are going to the wall. And this is why the ambulances are all queuing up outside. They can't go out to road traffic collisions. They can't go out and pick people up with suspected heart attacks, because they're all queuing up outside because we can't get patients out.
I couldn't disagree with you, Steve. I really appreciate it. Cool, James. It reminds me of I worked with an ambulance service in Birmingham for a television programme. I was there all week. And I know this is going to sound slightly weird, but this is true. The most appalling story of the whole week was, it was Christmas. This drunken middle-aged woman, am I allowed to say that? Whatever her pronouns were. I mean, awfully drunk. Fine, that's up to her. But she was causing abuse, and we had to go and get her. She was abusive to the ambulance crew. She threw up, and I mean, like I've never seen in my life. They took her to hospital, where she legally had to spend 8 hours in a bed, taking a bed for a way. It took them 45 minutes to clear up her puke. Right, I wrote an article in The Sun about this many years ago, and they were probably 2 hours from being out there helping people, as crushed as they were. And I wrote in The Sun and said, she should be charged for that bloody ambulance. And people went, oh, you can't do that, it's the National Health. Yes, I can, because by getting drunk, love, you stop those people picking up somebody who needs time and attention. I just think there's stuff that can be done. Maybe I'm an idealist, I don't know. Just annoys me.
No, I think you're completely right. I mean, this idea again that, oh, it's so wonderful because it's free at the point of use. Well, if you have an infinite supply for something, you're going to have an infinite demand for it, right? If you can keep going back to the trough, in some ways, they will do that. It's why people will take as many benefits as they possibly can. It's why you'll always go back for more of these kinds of things, right? That's fairly standard human behavior. When people were realizing that it was easier for them to stay on benefits than go and get a job, it made perfect sense for them to do these kinds of things, right? As you say, I think that putting even quite small nominal charges on things, right? So let's take GP appointments. There's a little brouhaha about the idea. Maybe you put a £5 or a tenner on those, and if it's a decent, reasonable thing, you get it knocked off the cost of the prescription. Just something simple like that, because that little grit in there makes people think twice and go, okay, maybe I will, maybe I won't. You'll have some people screaming now, oh God, you just want them all to die. You want the American system.
No,
you know,
if you've got a headache, don't call an ambulance. No. But if you've had a stroke in this country, like my mum did, you should be able to ensure that an ambulance gets you. He's looking at me, but he can wait 30 seconds. You've got 30 seconds. Tell me what you think about bins, because it does my head in. The Labour government are going to make it longer than 2 weeks. You wait till you have a baby and a puppy, mate. You'll want more than every 2 weeks. It's a nightmare.
Well, again, this is the kind of bread and butter services people want. You ask people on the street what they want. They want the bins collected. They want the potholes filled in. They want decent ambulances to come and save them or their mum when something's wrong. And they want their kids to have the shot at a decent education to help them get on in life. And you want police and you want an army and the justice system. 6 or 7 things. It's basically all you need. Now, every time people at home hears about the government trying to do something else that isn't those 7 things, then maybe go and think, let's fix those things first. And if they're not, write to your member of parliament and tell them, I want my bins collected. I want decent healthcare, and I don't want you fanning around with anything else.
I love having you on, JP. JP for PM, thank you for being on.